Yo, so if you've spent a significant amount of time in the gaming community, you've probably heard some variation of video game music is better than non-video game music. I only listen to video game soundtracks, etc., etc. And in isolation, these are harmless statements. It's totally cool. If you only care about video game soundtracks, all good. If you prefer video game music over the stuff you hear on the radio, totally cool. But I do want to explore this a bit deeper because I do find it interesting. What do people mean when they say this? What do people mean when they say video game music is better than regular music? I'm not going to do that the whole time, but y'all get the point. We can go step by step with this though, right? What do people mean when they describe something as game music? Because game music can go from classical to 8-bit to drum and bass to whatever. So for the most part, we can pretty much conclude that people just mean music that they heard in a video game context. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. But the other half of this is where it gets interesting, right? Because what do they mean when they describe something as regular music or non-video game music? And that's somewhat straightforward too, but there is a deeper conversation into the psychology behind that. So when they call something regular music and say they mean music that they heard outside of a video game, basically. They mean music that they heard maybe on the radio or on TikTok or something, usually. And that's very interesting to me because what that pretty much says is that some gamers, not all, but some gamers, need a video game context to enjoy music. And the other reason I find this interesting is because video game music pulls from regular music for inspiration. And I'm going to give a couple examples of this. We're going to start with Shoji Meguro. Shoji Meguro worked for Atlus. If you didn't know, he did Shin Megami Tensei. He did Persona. Specifically, he did the soundtrack for Persona 5, which was heavily influenced by acid jazz, which was a genre that was pioneered by groups like the Brand New Heavies in the late 80s and early 90s, and later on by groups like Jamiroquai also. Matter of fact, in the liner notes for the Persona 5 soundtrack, Shoji Meguro mentions Jamiroquai directly as an influence for the song Life Goes On. He says, quote, "Like in Persona 4, I made a fusion style track for the exams. It's a typical sub-dominant to tonic minor progression, but if you play this with the electric piano, it magically transforms into something just like Jamiroquai's Space Cowboy. Even though it seems like a simple chord progression, it's actually more complex than that." Translation courtesy of TooFarGone.mo and Reddit user OM Badai. Now, the next example I want to give for this comes from the Sonic 2 soundtrack. Now, check this out. Listen to this. That was a snippet of the song Glam Slam by Prince, slightly sped up. Does it sound familiar? All right, now listen to this. All right, y'all got that? Dun, 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 dun. Rewind the video if you got to, but yeah, the lead melody that you hear in Chemical Plant Zone from Sonic 2 lifted directly from Glam Slam by Prince, and it's not too surprising because Sonic 2 soundtrack pulls a lot from New Jack Swing and 80s funk, so yeah. We can also talk about how Earthbound sampled, not even just interpolated, but also sampled a lot of popular music for its own soundtrack, ranging from John Lennon to the Beatles to Chuck Berry. The list is vast for Earthbound, so I'm not going to get super deep into that, but it's well documented on the internet and you can look that up. So we see that game composers pull from regular music in order to get a lot of their melodies, a lot of their chord progressions. So with this being the case, why do some gamers create that separation in their mind between game music and non-video game music? And I have a couple ideas. I did a little bit of research on what it could be. I found one term, a psychological term called musical anhedonia, which is basically a condition where some people can't derive pleasure from music. I don't think that's necessarily what's going on with some of the gamers that only listen to video game soundtracks, but I do think it's a tangentially related phenomenon, because these are gamers that say that they can't necessarily enjoy music in isolation. They can only enjoy it in a game context. So outside of that, music is pretty much just, they're ambivalent to it. It's just noise to them outside of a game context. So I did find that interesting, but that's something I want to explore another time, because I'm not a psychologist. I'm not an expert on none of that or how the brain works. But I did find that interesting, especially because they said that musical anhedonia is heavily linked to people with autism. And I do know that autism is pretty common in the gaming community, so I'm not sure if that's kind of a spectrum thing going on, but I did find that interesting. Now, the other side of this, which is what I think is mostly going on, this is just a personal observation of my own, is that I think that there is a lack of cultural exposure on the part of many gamers, and that is why they can't necessarily enjoy music in isolation. So for example, some gamers might hear a song and say, oh, this gives me Persona 5 vibes or something like that, when it's just jazz. It's just acid jazz. It's not Persona 5 vibes. It's just acid jazz. Or they might be like, oh, I don't like hip hop or something like that, but I love the Samurai Champloo soundtrack. Samurai Champloo soundtrack is so much better than most hip hop, when really there's plenty of hip hop out there with a similar vibe that pulls from more jazzy influences like Nujabes does. You have Jay Dilla, Pete Rock, Mos Def, A Tribe Called Quest, plenty of examples of hip hop that pulls from a similar sonic palette that Samurai Champloo does. But because of your lack of cultural exposure, you don't necessarily see that, right? You're kind of exposed. Gamers like that might be more exposed to the mainstream or stuff that they hear on the radio, or even racist stereotypes about how hip hop is just gang banging, drug dealing, and strip clubs. And look, that's not necessarily your fault if that's your only exposure to the genre, but when you make claims that some rap or hip hop that you heard in an anime or video game is better than most hip hop, then you do open yourself up to being called out on your lack of education on the genre. Just saying. Overall, I don't think there's any problem with someone only enjoying video game soundtracks. I love video game music. I pull a lot of my inspiration for my music from stuff that I heard in game soundtracks. But it only becomes questionable when people like that use their love for video game music as some kind of barometer for having better taste than people who don't only listen to video game music. When a lot of the times, to be honest, it's the exact opposite. The people who listen to all music are actually the ones who have a higher taste level and have a more diverse palette and a better understanding of music as an art form. So that's just my opinion. Let me know what y'all think. GK, peace out.